NBA trade season is here. For the Boston Celtics, things might be a little quiet, but for other teams around the NBA, there's a lot of movement that we're expecting to see. So today, let's dig into NBA trades that Celtics fans don't want to see. It's a 3-man weave edition of Green with Envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. We've got the 3-man weave in the building. Of course, I'm your boy, Will Weir, checking in. How you doing? How you living? First up, we got my best friend, the coach of the podcast, the one and only Greg Manakis. Greg, how you doing today?
Chilling, bro. Chilling. Excited to talk about these trades. I want to see what you guys came up with. I want to see if you actually put them into the trade machine to see if they'll work. And let's make it happen, man.
Yeah, we got a lot of fun. I love this topic's really fun, can go in a lot of different places. And of course, we've got the head writer over at Celtics Blog, our podcast and cousin from across the pond, the leader of the Taylor gang, Adam Taylor. What's popping, Adam?
What's popping? I'm good, man. I'm good. What's popping? How you doing? How you living, Mr. Will Weir, Mr. Greg Manakis? I'm telling you right now, I did not put anything into trade machine, so that's what you're looking for from me. It's not happening today. I've come up with very basic ideas, but it's an exciting topic, man. I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, this is a fun one. So I think, we've already done a lot of discussions of what the Celtics may or may not do. Of course, Brad Stevens had comments last week about looking for a bigger wing. And, we talked about maybe O'Shea Brissett's that guy. And there's going to be potentially some movement the Celtics see towards the back end, but it's probably not going to be anything earth shattering that the Celtics do. However, keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like the Celtics are the top dog right now in the NBA, the last team without double-digit losses. Of course, some big games coming up against Minnesota and Milwaukee. But with that being said, a lot of teams are gunning for the Celtics. And so they want to actually find ways to improve their teams. So I thought it'd be fun for us to kind of look around at what potential trades are out there that could make a difference to the Celtics making a run at the championship this year. So we're going to kind of go through and snake around a couple different trades that we think are at least possibilities of happening between now and February 8th, which is that trade deadline. So we got about a month or so between the trade deadline. So I'm going to kick us off here, and I'm going to start us off with the team that we never want to talk about. Let's talk about the Miami Heat.
Oh,
and the trade that I'm going to propose is that DeMar DeRozan goes to the Miami Heat, and I have kind of two versions of this. Let's start with the easiest version. DeMar DeRozan goes to the Miami Heat, and funny enough, likely it's Kyle Lowry from a salary matching perspective, and then it becomes, do they want to give a pick or two? He's on an expiring deal, so the Bulls need to figure out, like, are we going to reset? How are we going to do this? So then does it become a pick or two? Maybe Nikola Jovic, who's like a he's like 2 to 3 million, so you can easily make that work. So you got to figure that out. So it's Lowry, and then either picks or Jovic would be kind of the framework of the deal that we're looking at. DeMar DeRozan to the Miami Heat. Adam, let's start with you. What would be your thoughts on that trade?
I mean, from a need standpoint, it gives them an extra ball handler, an extra playmaker, gives them a mid-range assassin, some scoring, takes a little bit of the attention off of Himi, takes a little bit of the playmaking duties off of Bam. I think defensively they have a few issues there. But Spo always finds a way to make everything work out well. I wouldn't be super concerned, but DeMar just feels like that guy that could just be an absolute nightmare in the postseason, especially during half-court actions. I'd be concerned. I don't know if it moves the needle enough for me to put Miami in the same bracket as Boston and Milwaukee, but I definitely think it puts you in that. Well, this team made a surprise run last season from the play-in to the finals. I'd be concerned. I'd be looking over my shoulder, but I wouldn't be petrified.
So, I mean, to me, I'm not sure that this is the best fit of all the guys that are out there for the Miami Heat. Like, even if you think LaVine, right? LaVine versus DeRozan, who makes more sense for what the Heat actually need? Because the lineup that the Heat are going to put out there, right, with DeMar DeRozan, you're probably going to have Jimmy Butler, Himi, and Jaime. at the same time. So we're going to have these three guys that are very similar. None of them are really good 3-point shooters. They all live in the same spots of the floor. So I'm not sure what that would do for their offense. It would give them more options, and the games where Jimmy Butler just decides, you know what, I'm going to score 5 points and act like game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals doesn't matter. Like maybe DeMar DeRozan wins them those games, but on the game-to-game basis, I'm not necessarily sure that DeMar DeRozan is the best fit. If you're telling me it was Zach LaVine going there, I think that would actually probably scare me just a little bit more. I don't think Zach LaVine's moving the needle for anybody, but in terms, if we're just doing like DeRozan versus LaVine going to the Heat from the Bulls guys, I would probably be a little bit more scared about LaVine, but I don't think either of those guys are the guy that I'm targeting for the Miami Heat or not targeting for the Miami Heat.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fit thing was the first thing I thought of, but everything about what we know of Zach LaVine thus far in his career screams not a Heat guy, right? I think that's, for me, the biggest red flag is that just does not seem like a match between those two. I think you're right. I think from a fit perspective, that's the way. The way that I was kind of looking at this is if you're just taking Kyle Lowry and turning it to DeMar DeRozan in what you have for that top set, for that top group for the Miami Heat, you're looking at Bam, Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Jaime, Duncan Robinson, Josh Richardson, Caleb Martin, Kevin Love, sprinkle in some Haywood Highsmith if and when needed. Like that's a really tough top of the roster.
Is.
And you're right. The fit's kind of weird, which in my mind, they're just going old school. They're digging into, we're going to play defense and we're going to be mid-range assassins. We're going to run all these different plays off of, dribble handoffs with Bam, some weird inverted pick and rolls. And if there's ever going to be a coach, it's going to be the newly minted 8-year, $120 million, king of Miami, Eric Spoelstra. Like he's someone that, even though that geometry of the floor doesn't feel like it fits, he, I think, could find a way to make it work. And then going from Lowry to DeMar DeRozan on the defensive side, you're just getting bigger and longer. And I just think you're getting a better overall play. So it's a talent play, and it's trusting that Spo is such a magician that even the faults that I think are very obvious to what you could see in this, he could find a way to make it work. And, from a Celtics perspective, DeRozan just always feels like a guy that is a threat to go for 35 to 40 against the Celtics and just get to his spots in very similar way that Jimmy Butler always finds a way to get to his spot. So having those two guys, at least one of them on the court at all times, playing off of Bam, if we get a fully healthy Hero, like I do think that's potentially a scary matchup for the Celtics. Just having another guy that we've seen in the past has felt very comfortable against the Celtics, even if his teams don't win. It feels like DeMar DeRozan typically always has usually a pretty impressive performance against the Celtics.
Yeah, I think if we're factoring in Spo, who by the way just got a ridiculous contract, the biggest contract in NBA history for a coach, 8 years, $120 million for your coach, makes a lot of sense with the Heat Mafia. Shout out to Spo for getting them checks, man. That's crazy. And I think if I were to bet on those guys, right, I would probably bet that Spo could get more out of LaVine than any other coach has, because LaVine did for a time period. I forget which iteration of the USA Basketball that LaVine was on, but he was actually looked at as a full court defender, like point of attack defender for that team. And I was really surprised watching it a few years back where I was like, oh damn, Zach LaVine's kind of defending his ass off for Team USA right now. So I have seen him play defense in that scenario. So I think the fact that Spo also has connections to Team USA, maybe there's a world in which he can extract the most out of Zach LaVine, and it gets him to buy in. Plus they have him on, the Heat workout program and all that, best shape of his life, everything that with them. But the guy that I would be more scared going to the Miami Heat is one Donovan Mitchell. So Donovan Mitchell would be the guy, if we're talking about the Miami Heat first, of a team that I'm still worried about. I'm not so worried about them like, you hear Bill Simmons talk about, but I am a little bit worried about the Miami Heat. Donovan Mitchell, if you put Donovan Mitchell on this Miami Heat team, the construction of the deal, I'm not exactly sure. You'd probably have to give up a little bit more. Definitely have to give up a little bit more to get Donovan Mitchell than you would to get one of the Bulls guys. But Donovan Mitchell, if you just strip it down to Donovan Mitchell, Jaime Jaquez, Jimmy Butler, and Bam, right? If Hero's the main piece going out, or maybe they work out some sort of 3-team deal, so Hero goes to a team that makes a little bit more sense for him. I think Mitchell in Miami is the team that scares me, because although the Heat have given us problems in the past, there's still part of me that's like, they don't have enough. Like, is Caleb Martin going to do it again? Is he going to be the reason again that we don't get to the finals this year? I wouldn't bet on that. But if you put Donovan Mitchell in that scenario, he would be the end of game closer, like even on another level than Jimmy Butler, because he can do it from all three levels, whereas Butler's really doing it from the mid post and into the basket.
Yeah, I think he gives them that killer, right? Like that certified killer. Like Jimmy can be that guy. Jimmy is that guy. But it's very easy to know that Jimmy's coming when there's not really much other talent around him. There's not enough floor spacing around him. You can kind of, especially when you've got 1 through 5 defenders like Boston, where you can switch pretty much every action. You add Mitchell into this, and the floor spaced a bit more. Now Mitchell has a room to probe. Butler has room to come off sort of like weak side screening actions. Bam can do a little bit more around the elbows and around the mid-range area. You just open up a bunch more stuff for everybody just by inserting Mitchell in. Whether they get to keep Jaime's a questionable in this deal. I think that he would be the guy that Cleveland
He would have to go, I think.
Yeah, I think Cleveland really push for him at that point. Ideally, you still want to keep a ball handler, because I think Mitchell is a perfectly solid playmaker, perfectly solid ball handler. But the reason he works so well in Cleveland when they're healthy is you have Garland being that table setter, right? And like Kyle Lowry's not that guy anymore. Tyler Hero can be, like, you can rely on him for half court after dribble like creation. But maybe if you're giving up Hero plus Jaime, then maybe Mitchell kind of has a bit too much like ball handling duties on his head, and being forced to be like a creator for Jimmy that you don't see the best of him. But man, I'd be scared shitless in the clutch with Jimmy and Donovan on the same team. He gives them that Dwayne Wade level fear factor, in my opinion. That's what.
And nobody on the Celtics can guard him.
Yeah, I mean, this is by far the scarier option. This is something that Mark Stein just had in his newsletter today, that as of at least right now, the Cavaliers are feeling pretty confident that they're not going to move Donovan Mitchell. Ironically, since Darius Garland and not Jared Allen, but Evan Mobley have been out, Jared Allen and Donovan Mitchell have been carrying the Cavs, and I believe they're 8-3 in their last 11. So they're feeling confident that if we can make upgrades, we still have a chance. Now, Donovan Mitchell is going to be an expiring starting next year. So I think if it falls apart, I think this trade scenario for me is probably just more likely in the offseason than it is right now. But either way, if and when this trade happens, which I think there is a high possibility that these two have eyes for each other at some point, if Donovan Mitchell does actually get put on the table, this is by far the scarier move, because we've talked about it before. Donovan Mitchell lives in that probably slightly just above Jaylen Brown tier of NBA players. And part of that is just Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs last year, notwithstanding, has typically been up to the task of at the very least being that dude that can be mano a mano. Oh, you got a guy dropping 40, 45, bet, let's go. I can do that too. I will match that for you. And that's sometimes where the Heat, even with these playoff runs they've made, it's been when they haven't had the scoring output, and you're like, this is where they actually kind of miss Hero a little bit, because Hero can put the ball in the bucket, and now you get Donovan Mitchell, which, I mean, you're comparing having Tyler Hero or Donovan Mitchell, it's apples and oranges, what you're looking at right there. And so if they were to add Donovan Mitchell to Bam and Jimmy, and as long as they can keep just enough that they can maintain a solid, 6-7 man rotation for that playoffs, those three alone would make it really scary for the Celtics in the Eastern Conference. So I think this is probably the scariest move on the board. It's just a question of, are the Cavaliers, who are still floating right in that mix of like 5 teams that are basically all between 4 and 8 in the East that have seemingly the same record, are they ready to hit the reset? And I think that's where the biggest question mark for this comes in.
So I want to stick with the Heat for a moment, but I went a little bit off the beaten track. For a player that's fallen out of the starting rotation over in Los Angeles, playing off the bench at the moment, I don't think he's very happy. I don't think any of the Lakers are very happy with Darvin Ham right now. Reports are saying that, the front office are backing him. They're hoping that everything works out with the players moving forward. That was in Sam Amick's piece earlier today on The Athletic. But it got me thinking with the Miami Heat. Okay, Cleveland don't really feel like trading Donovan Mitchell right now. Miami really needs somebody as an upgrade over Kyle Lowry, just like a reliable ball handler that can score.
Man, we're all trying to find Kyle Lowry. This has turned into the Kyle Lowry replacement podcast.
Yeah, I'm serious, man. But like for me, like a trade I wouldn't like to see, just because I think that his last 2 stops haven't worked out. When they were both on the West Coast. Last time he was in the East, he had his best seasons, like he was borderline all-star, and that's D'Angelo Russell. So a trade I wouldn't like to see, because I feel like his skill set actually complements Jimmy Butler's and Bam Adebayo's, and he could work next to somebody like Tyler Hero. If Hero's part of the deal, he can absorb that creation duty. That would be a guy that would worry me a little bit in Miami, because I feel like Spo is similar to what Atkinson was in the ability to get the best out of guys that are underrated. Obviously, we know that Spo does that on a completely different level to Atkinson. That's a guy I would be scared about if you were pairing him in a trio with Jimmy and Bam.
Yeah, to me, Russell, when I think about the direct matchup with the Celtics and Heat, I think one of the reasons why the Celtics struggled a little bit last year in the playoffs is because Tyler Hero wasn't on the court and they didn't have someone to go hunting, right? And I think Russell kind of falls into the same category as Hero, whereas if he's on the court, the Celtics have somebody that they can go pick on. So I would actually almost welcome D'Angelo Russell on the Heat, just because we would have another guy to go pick on. Offensively, I agree with you that I think he complements them really well. We've seen Russell, when he was on the Nets, actually give the Celtics a lot of problems. He had that one game where he was just completely unstoppable and scored 45 points, to the point where I was thinking like, oh, damn, like, does that mean the Celtics are going to go target D'Angelo Russell? Because we always target guys that just killed us, but we didn't, thankfully.
Except for Ish Smith. Ish Smith has killed us a million times and never once been a Celtic. Been every other team in the entire world, probably Shanghai Sharks, but somehow never been with Boston.
Yeah, Will, what are your thoughts on Russell? Would you be scared of that deal, or kind of on the same line with me?
I'm kind of in line with you, Greg. I memean, Russell, for me, offensively, he's an upgrade over Lowry. Like, right? Like, I think that would be true. I do think that. But with D'Angelo Russell, he's just one of those guys when I watch him, and it's been like, unless you go all the way back to those Nets days, as you started talking about, Adam, it's been a long time since I've watched the game and been like, I don't want to get D'Angelo Russell involved in this game. I'm a little scared. Like, I haven't had that thought in a long, long time when it comes to D'Angelo Russell. Now, part of that has been some of the fits that he's had, whether it's in Golden State or a brief stint in Minnesota and then going to the Lakers, and I don't necessarily know what the right fit is for Russell, but I do think if you play him off of Jimmy and Bam, like, that does open up a little bit more to his game and does make Miami on the offensive end more dynamic. But to your point, Greg, I do think it just becomes hunting season when you start to look at not even just the Celtics for the Heat, but if you look at, other teams around the league now, I mean, or at least around the East, Dame, Giannis, whoever it might be, there's a lot of teams that are going to be looking at like, okay, how do we do whatever's possible to get away from all of these other dynamic defenders that the Heat have? And let's just start going at D'Angelo Russell. And so it does leave a bit of a gap, because for all of Kyle Lowry's faults, we're trying to replace Kyle Lowry in every single one of these trades, right? He's going to step in. He's a smart defender. He's a smart flopper, if you want to call it that, but he's going to find a way to throw that gigantic ass around, and then it's actually going to make a difference at different points. Like,
I didn't know the term gigantic ass was going to be uttered on this podcast, but I'm so happy that it was.
Back a little bit. I want to push back with this. So the defense is more than fair, right? I think that no one's going to argue that D'Angelo Russell's going to get targeted. My argument or the pushback would be the Miami play a lot of system defense rather than individual defense.
It's a good point.
This is the Spo factor again, right?
Yeah, they've hid guys successfully for years under Spo, and I think that Russell, he's got the height, 6'3". If you can talk yourself into hiding him as part of a system defense, you can still be successful. Obviously, you're going to need to try and outscore teams at times, especially when you're trying to face a Boston or a Milwaukee. And again, I don't think this trade pole vaults them into that top 3 in the East or along. There's already 3 in the East if you're factoring in Philly. I feel like I'm being disrespectful to Philly, so I don't.
Don't worry, I got them coming up next, so we'll get to them.
I don't think that trade makes anything. Yeah, we'll just go back and then we'll work out.
Go back. We'll work out.
Hey, but Adam, I think that's a really good point though, because Russell has a really high IQ. right? And he's a smart player. It's just he has some physical limitations. He doesn't have great lateral quickness. He actually does play passing lanes decently well, and he's got good hands. Kind of similar to James Harden, just like, you know, they're not the best isolation defender, but when you know, if you were just like playing James Harden one-on-one, you would almost be like a little bit more worried about it just because he'd like take that matchup personally and he's got good hands and he's strong and whatnot. But in an NBA setting in isolation, maybe not. D'Angelo Russell's a smart player. So I actually think it's a really good point.
Yeah, I don't think he's like changing the dynamic or anything, but it's a guy that I'm just like, dude, he's a guard that can score off the dribble. If I'm a Celtic fan, I don't want too many of those guys.
I mean, here's a great example. Kevin Love, right? Like Kevin Love has went from, you know, I still don't know why Cleveland just let him go for nothing. Like that still is something that's a little bit confusing. But like Miami's put him in positions to be successful. He's not the Kevin Love of old, right? But they have found ways to put him in positions that he's successful on both the offensive and defensive end. And where, to your point, Adam, that's the beauty of having, you know, I fucking hate saying it, heat culture, and having, you know, Eric Spoelstra there, is that if you're a little bit concerned about what this individual player may be lacking, well, if there's ever a coach that I feel can find a way to make that work, Spo's the guy in the league that I'm trusting right now. So if he's going to give you that you know, that boost offensively, and you can put him, you know, at the bottom of that inverted 3-2 zone or 2-3 zone, whatever, wherever you're going to find a place to put him, like you can make that work. So I think Spo is the selling point for anybody that just gives them greater talent. I think that's the bottom line. Is what we're saying with Miami, is that they're a little bit talent short. If they find a way to add just more pure talent, all of us kind of fear Spo finding a way to make that work.
I agree. All right, Will, your turn.
All right. You mentioned the Philadelphia 76ers, Adam. That's where I'm going next with my pick. And I'm going to talk about an old friend here who is kind of forgotten.
Don't do it.
Okay. Go to Terry Rozier, which, by the way, real quick, before I even tell you what the trade is, look at my guy's stat line this year. 24 points per game, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. Shout out to Terry Rozier.
Since LaMelo went down, he's been balling.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Terry. So we got to get Terry back in the playoffs. I mean, well, we don't, because this is the whole point, is we don't want to get Terry back in the playoffs against the Celtics, but we've seen him. Terry's a dog, right? And Terry hasn't been back in the playoffs since he left Boston. One thing that's just, this is kind of a side note, but with Philly, they have so many different ways to make moves. It's a little bit terrifying. And I think there's a couple different options they could look to. Terry Rozier is one of them. The basic package would be something along the lines of Marcus Morris, Korkmaz, and some type of picks would be generally what they'd be looking to. For the Hornets, this is Gordon Hayward's coming off the books. They'll probably try to move him if they can. Terry Rozier, you're going to reset what Rozier and LaMelo, is that really going to be the backcourt you're looking at? He's got a few years left on his deal at a pretty reasonable price. So for the Sixers, not a bad investment. And when I'm looking at the Sixers, I feel like right now they're top heavy from a scoring standpoint, right? You have Embiid, you have Maxey. Their third leading scorer is Tobias Harris, who we've given a lot of shit to, but he's had a really good year. Then right below that, you have Kelly Oubre and D'Anthony Melton. D'Anthony Melton's averaging over 12 points per game. He's shooting below 40% from the field. Definitely not going to try to rely on that when we get to the postseason. Kelly Oubre, really nice story. I think he's been really good for them this season, but also he's going to be asked to do a lot on the defensive end, and we've seen that he's extremely streaky. Not necessarily something that they would necessarily want to rely on offensively in the postseason. And as much as Tobias Harris is having a great season, who knows? We've seen him be on fire for 5 minutes in the first quarter, and then we don't hear from him the rest of the game. So for me, Terry Rozier is just an added boost to that Maxey and Embiid 1-2 combo, where he's another scoring punch. He's another guy that just feels like he's not afraid of the moment. Now, it's been a while since he's been in the playoffs, but as a young Terry Rozier, we saw that, he wanted that moment. Sometimes maybe a little too much. Game 7 could have reined it in just a little bit with some of those shots. But I think for Terry Rozier, they already have a bunch of wings that have made them a little bit different of an identity. But I think the scoring punch is what's lacking. And so you get a guy like Terry Rozier, a guy who can handle the ball, who can, catch and shoot, can also handle, just like similar to Maxey, kind of play, downhill off of Embiid's that counter punch to Embiid being a little bit slower. I think he unfortunately fits pretty well with this team. And I think Terry Rozier is just an underrated asset that could be really valuable to, even if it's not the Sixers, some team that's in the playoffs.
Yeah, man. So I also had Terry getting traded, but I had Terry getting traded to the Heat because I was just doing like a whole bunch of Heat trades. Because I think Terry on the Heat actually probably makes a little bit more sense than Terry on the Sixers, because playing Maxey and Terry at the same time is a little bit
That's the
redundant.
one
It's,
issue.
it's a
Yeah.
small backcourt. Whereas the trade I have where Terry going to the Heat, I have Terry Rozier and Cody Martin going to the Heat. And then that way you can pair the Martin twins together. And then you have Terry Rozier kind of filling in that point guard role where Kyle Lowry and Jovic. I feel like going back to the Hornets kind of makes sense. It's easy. You're not really giving up anything there. But yeah, with Rozier going to the Sixers, I think that it would be a cool story for Terry to be able to get back in the playoffs. You know, the scary Terry legend is legendary in Boston for what he did. I would probably imagine he'd work better on a team with a little bit more size, somebody else that they can pair him with, just like a big guard that he could be paired with, which is why I think Charlotte was kind of hoping it would make sense because LaMelo is 6'6", 6'7". But I like that idea. Adam, what are your thoughts on Rozier going to the Sixers?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I'm not sure if Philadelphia would want to mess with the backcourt pairing of Melton and Maxey. I know that Melton's obviously not the most efficient shooter, but he's a hell of a defender, both in space, in transition, in the half court. And that backcourt's working very, very well. Right? So changing that up midway through a season where you're having a breakout year from Maxey, putting him in alongside another guy that needs the ball in his hands to be a bit more dominant. Now, I've got questions there. I've got questions whether that makes sense, whether that would fit. From an offensive standpoint, if things can click, they're going to be really damn good. Mate, if you can get Terry to buy into a 6-man role and like come off the bench as like the second,
and that's kind of the role I think I would envision is that he's coming off the bench and he's that
now I'm scared.
Fill it up vacuum scorer or microwave type scorer.
Yeah, because when he left Boston, the whole point was he didn't want to be on the bench. He wanted to be a starter. Well, he's gone away. He's being a starter. Hasn't been able to have much success getting to the postseason. Okay, now I'm ready to. I've been around the league a bit longer. I've matured. I've done my stat numbers. I've had big scoring nights. Now let me come off the bench and be this contributor on a championship team. That would scare me. As you say, he brings a bit of size, brings speed, bit of aggression, bit of grit. Philly fans, for as much as I hate to say this, I think Philly fans would love him because of the way
such
he
a fit there with his mentality and attitude in Philly. He would become an easy Philly fan favorite, I think.
And that would be what made me sad.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go from one former Celtic to another former Celtic, back to the Sixers. I'm gonna say it because this is what is the topic here? Trades we do not want to see. And one thing with Ja Morant's injury, one thing I do not want to see, one is Marcus Smart anywhere near the Eastern Conference. But if Marcus Smart got traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, I honestly don't know what I would do. I don't know what Marcus would do. Would Marcus just be like, no, I'm not going there? You know what I mean? Like,
I retire.
Would he refuse that? I actually wonder like how much sway Marcus might have with Memphis to be like, nah, don't. Like, you can trade me if you want to move me, just like don't send me to the East. Or maybe he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to stick it to them. They let go.
He's got that Aaron Nesmith chip on his shoulder. Wants to, says all the right things, but at the end of the day, you want to prove, hey, you shouldn't have traded me.
Exactly. And Marcus has been playing really well last night. The clip of him hitting the 3-pointer with the dislocated finger is the most Marcus Smart. Throwing up gang signs, Will? Chill.
Yeah, I was just asking myself.
Yeah. I was like, damn, Will. No, but if Marcus Smart ended up on if Marcus Smart ended up on Philadelphia, I think that is the upgrade over Melton, right? I think Melton is a great defender. He plays well, but he doesn't necessarily have the ability to guard up as well as a Marcus Smart does, where I think Rozier is kind of living in the same lane as a Melton, right? I think Marcus is a serious upgrade over Melton just because of the toughness that he's going to bring, the internal knowledge he would bring to the Sixers about the Celtics. That's a nightmare scenario, just as much of a nightmare for Bucks fans as it was for Drew Holiday to end up on the Celtics after they traded for Dame Lillard. It would be just as much of a nightmare for Marcus Smart to end up anywhere near the Celtics in the playoffs.
So I've talked myself into, I've talked myself into this. If Marcus was to be made available for trade, I genuinely feel like Houston just snap him clean up. I think Houston they have the trade assets. Ime's there. He worked with Marcus. Probably I just feel like Houston come along and make that deal happen. They have everything necessary, and I've talked myself into that, so I don't have to face this. Do you know what I mean? I can live with
the darkest timeline of Marcus coming back.
It's the worst case scenario, man. Like thinking about it, even talking about it, it doesn't make me feel good. I feel sick to my stomach even thinking about it. But this is the worst case scenario for Celtics fans.
So since the Ja news came out, I feel like I've seen this float around quite a bit on Twitter as like Marcus Smart could get traded wherever. And he's still got a couple years at 18 million, which is becoming a super nice price for a guy like Marcus Smart, right? When you think about, Kawhi Leonard just got his $50 million extension, when there's going to be all these guys making 40 to 50 million, and you're going to start to see guys like Marcus Smart making 18 million. Like that's a pretty sweet deal for the next couple years. So my only thought process is that I haven't really understood like why, like I know Memphis is about to probably end up in the top part of the lottery, but they just, how many ever games Ja played, 10, 11 games, they were like 8-3, and they had Marcus, Ja, Bane, Jaren Jackson for a 10, 11 game sample size. And they were really, really good. Like Memphis was about to get really exciting to see where they could climb to and be at the bottom of that Western Conference and kind of wreak havoc of like, damn, this is not like a normal 7 seed that we're playing right now with the Grizzlies. And then by next year, they'll get back Steven Adams, Brandon Clark. I feel like the Grizzlies, if I'm them, like I would have unless you just came in and gave me some type of crazy offer for Marcus Smart, I would have no incentive to move him after the sample size that I can hold on to and say, look at what this looked like when we have our all NBA guy. We've got our two defensive players of the years, and we've got, Desmond Bane emerging, and then we just got to add to the fringes and we get back some of our bigs. Like, to me, I don't see any urgency from the Grizzlies to make a move for Marcus Smart. So for me, I'm hoping that this is a very, very low chance of becoming reality, because I just don't think it would make a ton of sense, at least to me.
Yeah, that's why I think the Rockets idea that Adam floated out is probably the one that makes the most sense, because they do have a lot of young talent that they could flip for Marcus, right? Whereas the Sixers, I don't really know what they'd be able to offer to get Marcus that would entice.
I don't have a young
Memphis
piece that's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that, and it lines up.
Yeah, they don't they don't really have that. So I think anybody that's played for Ime, it's interesting with Ime coming back this weekend to Boston. There's going to be the connection throughout the rest of Ime's tenure in Houston with Celtics former Ime players going to want to play with the Rockets. But who's up next? Is it Adam?
Yeah, it's me. So I'm going to go look at the Western Conference. It's all well and good looking at the East. We play these teams more. You've got to get through the East to get to the NBA Finals. One team that's really been sucking, just plain old sucking, is the Warriors, man. The Warriors have not been good this year at all. Kind of hurts as well. Like, Clay's not being great right now. Draymond's missed a ton through 2 different suspensions. Plus, he started the season with an injury. Steph's had 2 games this year where he didn't hit a free. 2 after going nearly a million days.
Where's the Warriors pick that we got? Is it in Portland now?
It is in Portland.
Okay.
Yeah, it's looking very, very good for Portland right now. So the trade I like, it's the one that's been floated around a bunch, is like an Andrew Wiggins plus whatever for Pascal Siakam. Right now, the caveat to this, as reported by, I think it was Shams about a week ago, was because we're past December 30th, any team that trades for Siakam can only offer him a 2-year deal, right? It's 2-year max money, but it's only 2 years. Sam Amick today reported that Siakam's seeking a full max. So it's either he hits free agency, someone signs him, and then they have a verbal agreement to sign him to a max. Well, they can't know, because then they're limited to that 2-year. Anyway, the one thing to me, it's like, okay, it's all well and good navigating the East, but you still need an opponent that you can beat in the NBA Finals, right? And the Warriors, they've just got that much experience, and I do feel like maybe they don't. I don't want to bleed into the narrative of they live in the Celtics' heads, but they're just an opponent that I don't really want to have to see. I don't want to have to see Steph Curry in a Game 6. You had Siakam there, an all NBA level guy, playing playing next to Draymond with Clay, with Steph. CP3 coming off the bench. I don't want to see that shit in game 6, game 5, game 7 of the fucking NBA finals with this Boston team, with knowing how much pressure is going to be on them next year if they fail again. Like, that's not for me. So this is a trade that I do not want to see, because I feel like that would catapult, like it would re-galvanize the Warriors, and then we would probably end up seeing them in the NBA finals.
Yeah, my only concern if I'm the Warriors is the type of guy that I'm bringing in. Is he going to be able to pick up the Warriors system quick enough?
Yeah.
I don't know if Siakam's that level of IQ. I think over a couple of years, he might be able to fit into it and develop the chemistry with Steph and with Clay. But, you know, the fact that he's not a great 3-point shooter, and he's probably going to be on the court with Draymond. Now you got 2 non-shooters on the court. Clay's kind of fallen off a little bit. That would be my biggest concern. But Pascal, you know, he's a guy that I definitely, that's an upgrade. Although,
Yeah.
like Jason Tatum wouldn't have to have the Andrew Wiggins nightmares if Siakam ended up there. So like maybe that's a net positive.
I don't even want to think about whatever dark magic was used for Andrew Wiggins.
He's paying for it now, dude.
Dude, I know it is so painful to watch.
Like literally sold his soul to win a championship.
Exactly what I was thinking. Exactly. So it's that part of it. I just like don't even want to think about. You know, like you said, Siakam is definitely, you know, a talent upgrade. It's the fit that might be a little bit more difficult. And because Clay and Steph aren't producing the same type of gravity that they once were, it just makes it all that much tougher. So I think, Adam, I don't think you're wrong, because I think Siakam is probably the guy that's most likely to be traded that could have the biggest impact on which way a title contender might shift. And I actually have another trade, along the same lines that you're thinking here, Adam, that who might the Celtics see, you know, if they were to, you know, make it all the way through the East and get to those NBA finals. So a trade that I also had for Pascal Siakam was Siakam to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So
Why would you do that to Boston?
I think Siakam's a really interesting fit. Now the Thunder, because they have so many picks, they're going to be able to basically keep all of their core. They'll put Bertans and maybe have to give up Jay Will, the big. Maybe they'd have to flirt with giving up Kason Wallace. Maybe they might be able to keep at least one of them, and then just throw a couple of picks in. And they have 15 first-round picks over the next like 5-6 years, whatever it is. So they can give up an extra pick or put some protections on it so that they can actually make themselves the most attractive offer. Now, will Siakam want to stay there? I don't know. Who knows long term? But if you can add Siakam into a front court where you're now going to have, you know, Jay Will, you're going to have Siakam, you're going to have Chet as your starting front court. It's a pretty damn good starting front court to go along with, you know, Shea, Lou. We'll see if they might even be able to flip Giddey into another deal, because the thing about this deal is Toronto's not going to want Giddey, right? Giddey does not fit next to Barnes, next to RJ Barrett. Like, I don't think that that's going to be a great fit. So I think if Oklahoma City can pull this off, they can then potentially make even another deal with Giddey as a centerpiece to even add something else to this. So I think this gives the Thunder, I don't know, it makes the Thunder a lot more intriguing to me as a serious finals contender.
There's no NBA team in Kentucky, right?
There is not.
I'm kidding. So
that joke went over my head.
I didn't get the joke either. But.
Oh, okay. I'll explain it to you guys off air.
Are we talking
we're talking about Josh Giddey, but we'll move on.
Talking about consent ages.
We'll move on. So here's my question, you guys. What's a scarier fit? Is it Siakam going to the Thunder or Marcus Smart? Let's just throw Marcus Smart back to the Thunder. Lou Dort.
I think it's Siakam, man, and the reason is just because like they need more size. Like I think that's one of the things that the Thunder need is I think they also maybe need a little bit more shooting. They're very selective. They shoot a good percent from three, but they're very selective with how many threes that they shoot. Siakam is certainly not going to help that, but he is going to help you from. And like I said, if you move Giddey as well, and you're just putting Siakam into like a Giddey spot, they're both not great shooters, but Siakam's a good defender. And he's going to give you a little bit more length to be able to defend, be a little bit more versatile with him and Jay Will. So I think even though Marcus can guard up, I think Siakam would be a better move for them as opposed to Smart.
Yeah, he also elevates your interior game as well, right? You've got that post game that he can bring. He can operate in the middle a little bit in the seams.
Yeah, there's space for him, right? On
Yeah,
that team.
I think that, and you've got that. Like everybody talks about spacing and looks at the 5-out, right? The horizontal spacing where you're stretching teams out. He can come and give you that lateral spacing where teams are being stretched towards the baseline and towards the perimeter, which then gives someone like Shea opportunities to kind of penetrate off the dribble and then counter with that mid-range jumper as defenses rotate over. He gives you a different form of spacing that you already have with Chet, but Chet can give you that horizontal 5-out spacing while you go like a 4-out 1-in with Siakam in the dunker. And like you can stretch things out differently. It just gives them a different dimension to attack. I also think, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I also think the Thunder head coach is one of the better young coaches in the NBA.
Mark Daigneault.
Daigneault, that's it.
Yeah, it's a Massachusetts guy. I forget where. Massachusetts, though.
I'm not from Massachusetts.
That's true.
I should be. But I think he's going to be able to figure things out a bunch. And again, when it comes to like Marcus Smart or Siakam, this is a straight talent deal, right? So you're going all NBA over all defense. And I genuinely think that's because Oklahoma are so heavy on offense, right? The entire thing is like they're an offensive based team.
What does Siakam make, Will? How much money?
Well, he's an expiring, so he's like I think he's like
I think it's 29 mil.
Yeah, I think that's about
I'm
right.
just trying to figure out if they had the contracts to go get both.
No, I did go through and make it, and they also have, they're under the luxury tax, so they can take on a little bit more. So they can make it work, especially that, like we talked about this, I think, a few episodes ago. This is why they kept the Bertans contract, right? Because it's like 17 million. So you can use that plus Poku, which is like 5 million. And they have like there's one other guy.
Since we played the Thunder, I've been like scheming ways for them to make it to the NBA Finals. Is there any? Do they have the contracts? Because they have the picks, right? Picks are all. Yeah. We know that they can.
The Raptors don't want picks though. Like there's a lot of reporting out there that they don't want picks. They want a very similar trade to what they got for Anunoby from the reporting, obviously.
But that's why I think Oklahoma City can at least include the other Jay Will and maybe Kason Wallace, and those are like kind of the players, along with they'll have one extra pick that someone else can't offer that will get a deal like that across the finish line.
I think they're looking at like, hey, we want a like we want like a Jalen Green or an Alperen Sengun for like that's the type of level guy they want. You're not getting that. So Boston are getting that when they're trading Porzingis.
For sure. I think.
All right, Greg, let's go to your trade.
I get one more.
Yeah, we got one. I kind of snuck one in there with Siakam. So Greg and Adam get one more each, and then we'll call it.
Okay. Well, this is a team that we just mentioned, the New York Knicks. They've already made their trade, right? They got OG Anunoby. They look great. I think they're still undefeated since the trade. I think they're 5-0 since making the trade. I do think that there's a world in which the New York Knicks making one more move could actually put them into real NBA title contender. I don't think they're there right now. I don't, and I know they're probably not going to move on from Julius Randle just because I don't know what his value is around the league. Like he's more important to the Knicks than he is to anybody else. Like no one's like, we got to go get Julius Randle right now. So this is like a scenario in which the Golden State Warriors, like, man, we just can't make it work with Draymond Green. We have to move on from Draymond. We tried to bring him back. We tried to bring him back into the fold. It's just not working. Dude was just talking about retiring, right? Maybe they decide they got to move on from him, right? So I know Draymond is the best player in this deal, but considering the circumstances surrounding Draymond Green and Gary Payton II to the Knicks. Okay, they get another great guard defender, and they get Draymond, who is an upgrade, right? And no matter what they have in the front court, he's an upgrade. And you give them Isaiah Hartenstein, who's been playing great, would actually work for the Warriors, right? He can fit in, do a lot of what Draymond does, just not at that level, a little bit more size. And Evan Fournier just to make the contracts work, and you get another shooter in Golden State. So Draymond Green, Gary Payton II for Hartenstein and Fournier. I'd actually be interested to see which fan base would be more upset to hear this trade floated out there.
It'd be the Warriors fan base, like no doubt. I like it. I think it makes sense for both sides. I think that isn't a trade you're going to see by February. Like Golden State are going to run with Draymond to the end of this season at a minimum. They've just signed him to that 4-year, $100 million deal.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, like he's in like the first few months of that. You're not going to bail on that when the front office has been very vocal about supporting Draymond, supporting Steph and Clay throughout, like, letting them ride off into the sunset, straddling those two timelines, like, and for the better or worse. But if they make a decision to kind of move away from that at the end of the season, and New York want Draymond, that deal makes a ton of sense. The only issue is if it happens at the end of the season, I'm pretty sure Fournier is expired at that point, so you need to find a different salary filler.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty interesting deal. I mean, with Draymond, it's, like you said, Greg, the Knicks are kind of vibing right now, right? 5-0 after the OG trade, and Hartenstein's been great for them. Do you really want to throw Draymond Green into that mix? Into that,
dude, Tibbs would freaking love Draymond.
Tibbs would love him, but to me, this is kind of a move that the Knicks might have made 5 years ago, where it's probably too short-sighted, not knowing, like you said, Draymond was literally just saying that Adam Silver had to convince him not to retire.
But what are they giving up, really? You know what I mean? Like, Hartenstein's been really good for them, but they next season they're gonna have Mitch Robinson back, right? So Hartenstein, at that point, they're probably gonna have to choose between the two of those guys, right? So I think
Hartenstein might be an expiring, to be honest. I think he's on a 2-year deal. I have to look that up here.
Right, but I mean, if he's expiring, then like, what the hell? Might as well make it happen. And then you get Draymond locked in for. I'm like talking myself into this deal now from a Knicks perspective, because Hartenstein's been awesome. What Hartenstein did against Embiid the other night spoke wonders, because I also think Hartenstein matches up really well against the Celtics. I think he's a much better matchup guarding Porzingis than Mitchell Robinson is. I think Robinson poses a lot of problems for a lot of teams, but I don't think the Celtics are necessarily one of them now that we have Porzingis. So Hartenstein makes a lot of sense, which is why I think the Warriors would actually like at least think about it, because Hartenstein's good. And I think he can come in and, Looney hasn't been great this year. But I think Hartenstein coming into that center role, he's a bigger Draymond, in terms of like his ability to facilitate in the offense and whatnot. I feel like he's the type of guy that would be able to pick up the reads with Steph and Clay pretty quickly. Big fan of Hartenstein, but I do think Draymond in New York would make me more scared of the Knicks than I am now.
Do you think him and Brunson would be a good combo?
Yeah. I think they would they both have such high IQs. I think they would play really well together. I don't know about him and Randall.
That's the other part, right? It's just like, it's interesting to think about. I like that idea. That's a good thought experiment. I actually don't know. Like, I think I can talk myself into a yes from both sides, but I think I could also talk myself into a no from
and
both
a hell
sides
no
as
from
well.
Both sides.
Yeah, exactly. So it could really go either way. All right, Adam, round us out. You got one more for us here?
Yeah, but it means we've got to go back to South Beach. Look, I'm sorry.
We started in South Beach. Let's end in South Beach. That's all right. It's symmetry.
All right, then. So this one isn't really logical in the terms of his name's been in trade talks a little bit, but not really massively. But Isaiah Stewart to Miami.
Beef
stew, like doubling down on that physicality, doubling down on that gritty mentality. Kind of an upgrade to their bench rotation in terms of just bringing somebody off the bench that's a big body that can play a couple of different positions, can defend well, can bring that, like, just an energy guy, like an O'Shea Brissett but good type of like.
I thought you were pro Brissett now.
We made you the president of the fan club. How are you going to throw a stray at O'Shea like that?
Because I've come too far.
The first time Adam gave him credit, the next game O'Shea did not play well. So.
Yeah, and what I'm going to say is, like, I've come too far. I've kind of got to commit to the bit at least during podcasts for at least a little while longer, right? But like, and a high level energy guy that fits the Heat culture. I think Stewart would be good there. I wouldn't like to see it. Why? Because I really like Beef Stew. I like his nickname, and I don't want to have to root against him. I don't think he makes much of a difference for them in terms of like ceiling wise, but I do think he probably slightly raises the floor.
Yeah, I think he's a great fit. Like I said, Zach LaVine feels very not Heat culture-ish. Isaiah Stewart feels like, oh yeah, let's grit and grind, let's get in there, let's mix it up. Like that. He feels like a type of dude that would fit very well into that Miami culture, that Miami system. So I'm with you. Great fit. This move wouldn't necessarily worry me too much. I don't think it changes their trajectory. Like with or without
the floor
him,
goes up a little bit, but
a little
the ceiling don't change.
Yeah, like they're still a threat, and they're slightly more equipped, right? I think Isaiah Stewart just gives them another big body. That's always something that the Heat are kind of lacking is, okay, Bam, Kevin Love are kind of your two main big guys in your rotation. That's it. Like, obviously Bam's amazing, but like he has to sit at some point, right?
Yeah.
And so if you want to have another big man that you can reliably go to, I mean, they were playing, what was it? Were they playing Miles Plumlee, Mason Plumlee in the finals last year? Like, and they had picked him up after the trade deadline off of waivers. He wasn't even playing in the league, you know? So I think that's always an area
Was
that
it Plumlee or was it Zeller?
No, it was Zeller. That's what it was. That's what it was. Sorry, I mixed up my white boys. It was Zeller that was playing. That's totally right. 100%. Sorry, Plumlees. I didn't mean to do that to you. Especially Mason's pretty solid. Miles Plumlee, you're more along the same lines. But, you know, Isaiah Stewart would be obviously an upgrade over Zeller in that spot for this postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Raises their floor. Also, beef stew, man. This weekend in Austin, Texas is going to be very cold, and I might have to go make some beef stew. Soup weather, baby.
Get yourself a soup, baby.
That's a good ending for a show right there.
Just going to meet. Should we all just eat some soup? How about next podcast? We each,
because that's a Janos thing, right? Like, it's a soup is poor. Soup is.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You don't know who is it? Janos?
Oh, from Twitter. Yeah. I got what you're saying.
Whiskey is poor, soup is served. Like, if you end on a soup reference, like it's Celtics Twitter in 101, it's not as good now. I've had to explain it, but like we know for future.
For future reference.
I didn't realize we had people commenting. What's up? Shout out first to the floor, tuning in, podcasting cousins.
Yeah, appreciate everybody on Twitter.
Also from across the pond, but just a very different pond.
Very different one. Which sometimes people mistake you from, which is, you know, not the case. But either way, guys, this was a really fun podcast. Enjoyed going over Celtics trades that we do not want to see, or NBA trades that we do not want to see as Celtics fans. It was always fun kind of trying to think about it from a different perspective. But for myself, for Adam, for Greg, that's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. And Greg, do we have a
man? Hey, so we've been talking
we've
been talking on the pod how we only have the outro music for the pod. And I figured out, you know, why the hell not just throw the music video for Black Sheep Optimist, Get This High, for all of our video content as well. So enjoy, everybody. Peace.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason takes